Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Right now in Warzone, we've got a very interesting meta layout when it comes to the rifle category in specific, because with the various different changes that they've made over the past couple of seasons, they've been buffing some strange ARs and nerfing some strange ARs here, and they're making some interesting changes there that we were kind of scratching our heads about, but it's led to this point in time now where there is a new factor in the rifle meta, and the factor is you. I want to explain that in depth here today. So as we get into it, if you enjoy the video, if you find it helpful at all, do me a favor and drop a like on the video. It is always really appreciated. And if you're new here, you want to guarantee you're up to date with everything going on in COD, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those post notifications. But as you can see here, we are starting things off on True Game Data, and shout out to Tony. He puts in the work to get all this data readily available for everyone, and so easy to actually interpret and dissect. You can see here we've got listed out a bunch of the main rifles right now. The Advancer, which is one of my personal favorites at the moment, the Hemlock, which I've seen a lot of talk about, the Kastov, both variants of that, the Lockman 5.56, the M13B, the M4, TAC-56, Geist. Now we can only do up to 9 in this particular case, but these are all based around mid to long range fights. And if you were to look at this just straight up and say, okay, out of these 9, if I wanted to, focus around 40 to 50 meter fights, what would I be going for? I mean, this graph would clearly show the Advancer is crazy in the mid range and even over long range technically, but that's important to note that that's maybe not always the case. Our hot pink bar, the M4, really good in the mid range here too. Our bright green, the Kastov 7.62, not all that bad. But this graph does not tell the full story, because this graph does not factor in any amount of personal level of skill. You might be frying with the Advancer, but be really bad at the 7.62, which probably isn't the case. If you're frying with one, you're probably okay with the others, but some players might prefer the feel of the M13 more than, the 5.45. We can see the Hemlock right now on paper, its TTK sucks beyond 47 meters in comparison, really. It drops off really harshly across the board, but if you love the feel of the Hemlock over the Lockman 5.56, there might be a way where on paper it might not look better, but in reality it actually is. So if we go into the firing range here, you can see in one setup here, I've got my Lockman 5.56, and the other I've got my Hemlock. And let's just test shoot at some dummies initially with the Lockman 5.56. We'll fire some shots, take out the first dummy, fire some shots, take out the second dummy, fire some shots, take out the third dummy as well. Although we didn't get the full kill because the damage here is different, but you guys can see top left, my accuracy 55% on the Lockman 5.56. Now let's look at the Hemlock and go through and do this same deal. Take out the first dummy, take out the second dummy. The armor is so weird in the firing range. Take out the third. 60% accuracy here. So by going through and actually testing, you can see I'm a bit more accurate initially with my Hemlock versus my general Lockman 5.56 build, right? That's going to differ between my 7.62 and my M13 and my M4. But because of the way that they've actually adjusted the various different rifles over the course of the past few meta updates, the real meta rifle for a lot of players is going to be the one that you end up being the most accurate with. So now we're back on True Game Data, and what I've done is actually turned on the True TTK simulation tool, and you guys can now see underneath the face cam, I've entered in accuracy inputs for every rifle. Now, as we saw on the Hemlock, I was about 60% accurate. On the Lockman 5.56, I was about 55, and I've gone through and filled out, accordingly based on these other rifles where roughly I would be. 7.62, a bit more recoil, so I'm slightly lower on that. I've been using the Geist a ton lately, so I'm pretty accurate with that right now. And if I go through and actually click simulate on here, we get a very different graph. We noticed that before, the Advancer was absolutely king in the mid-range here at like 46 meters now, but because of the accuracy factored in, you guys can see it's actually towards the bottom of the list now with around a 2000 millisecond TTK, or a 2-second TTK, as opposed to the Geist for me, which I've been super accurate with, now being the fastest TTK at about 46 meters. And that changes over range as well when you factor in the damage per mag, the actual damage values and headshot multipliers, upper body multipliers of these various weapons. When you factor in accuracy, it becomes a very different story for controller and keyboard and mouse, right? You can see really over range now, the Geist is my go-to, and the Hemlock, as bad as it was on the real TTK, just raw stat chart that we saw, it's now second best. Now the Advancer does sort of come back over time, but you're not using an Advancer at 75 meters because the recoil is a bit too much. Your accuracy would be much worse there, 35% maybe. You can see the M4's damage just doesn't hold up enough over range. Even if I am relatively accurate with it, similar to like the M13 or something, there's a pretty drastic difference in that. So this graph can change a ton if you are someone who is constantly using the M4 and you are wildly accurate with that in specific. The M4 suddenly becomes maybe your go-to #1 rifle. If you're like me and you've been using the Geist all season and you're super comfortable with that recoil pattern, and you're now hitting more shots with the Geist, Geist versus an M13 or versus even a 7.62, which has a better TTK on paper and better damage than most of these rifles, it completely changes the game. So long story short here is that when it comes down to the overall rifle meta now, I want to really emphasize this doesn't necessarily apply the same to LMGs or to SMGs because there's some distinct damage differences there. I mean, the RPK and the RAP are very different there. The ISO 45 and the BAS-P are different in the close range and even in the mid range. The ISO 9 and, you know, the Hurricane are very different. But with the rifles now, they've adjusted these in ways where the stronger hitting rifles from the past are now a little bit weaker. The weaker rifles from the past are now a little bit stronger. It's very balanced across the board, and there is no definitive #1 rifle. Now, in the coming days, I'm going to give you guys my list of the ones that I think are the best for most players going off the overall skill gap. But also, for what it's worth, I should mention, if you're ever just curious or maybe you don't want to always wait on that initial video breakdown for the new rifles or whatever the case may be, my community page does have all my loadouts, and I do my best to keep things up to date over there. But if you're ever curious, oh, maybe I want to try this rifle, I want to see what long range advancer might be, or, you know, a good setup for whatever other gun you might be interested in, I've got setups over there, like I said, that's got the full attachments listed out with all the tuning and everything as well. So if you do want to check that out, if you're looking for builds, by all means go for it. But like I said in the video, if you got that certain setup that you know is your go-to, you're familiar with it, you just want to see if it is capable of holding up with those other top TTK options that, you know, you might have in mind, go through and test that accuracy in the firing range and see how it actually stacks up. As it stands now, if you're looking for your go-to playstyle, jump into the firing range within the game, go on those dummies, set the plates to whatever you want, just focus on your aim there and see which of these rifles you're feeling the most accurate with. Or if you've been using one in game for a long time now and you're super comfortable with its recoil, see what your accuracy is with it and compare it to maybe a different rifle that you know might be stronger in theory, but in reality, it's a very different story. So like I said, shout out to True Game Data because this tool has been around for a bit. We've actually talked about this accuracy TTK based stuff before, but now specifically with the rifle category, this is more important than ever because like I said at the start of the video, the determining factor in whether this rifle is meta or that rifle is meta really isn't the stats as much now as it is your level of familiarity and your level of comfortability with that gun. But that being said, that is going to wrap things up for this one. If you enjoyed the video, do me a favor, drop a like on it. It would be really appreciated. And if you're new here, you want to guarantee you're up to date with all things going on between MW3 and Warzone, be sure to hit that subscribe button on your way out. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.